Anyway, thank you for answering my invitation.
Pleasure. Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Keir, can you introduce yourself for the coaches in Taiwan?
Yeah, so I grew up as a terrible athlete and I didn't want to get a real job. So I became a strength and conditioning coach, and it took me a while. So I graduated in 2008 from university, and it took me almost 2 years, no, over 2 years to get an internship just to work for free. So I did that. Whilst I was finishing my master's degree, I did that. And then after a year, I got a job at the place that I interned, which was London Wasps Rugby. You should tell from my Instagram, I've done a lot of rugby. Everything I did prior to 2018 was rugby. So yeah, London Wasps, at the end of the first year, they gave me a paid job as an assistant for the academy. I did that for a year. Then I became head of academy after a year, and I didn't like it. So I left, and I went to an adult rugby club, one league below. I took a pay cut there to become the head strength coach, Rotherham. Did that, moved to Australia, Sydney Roosters, Argentina as a temp, Sydney Roosters, back to Argentina, and was told don't leave again, even if, you know, you get offered a lot of money or all that kind of stuff. So I was lucky enough to go to the World Cup. And that made me popular enough to get an offer to go to Tokyo. So I went to Tokyo and did that for 2 years. And since then, I've been in America. So I did 2.5 years in college football. And then since October, I've gone full-time with Strength Coach Network.
Do you like college football?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of whatever environment you're in, there's always good stuff and bad stuff. And I think where you are in your career or where you are in your life will determine how much of it you're willing to trade for the good stuff.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, when I was 24, 25, it wasn't a problem that they paid me no money. It wasn't necessarily a problem that I had to argue a lot with sport coaches because I didn't know enough to be able to tell them exactly why they were wrong. I had an idea they were wrong, but I was as ignorant as they were. And then, you know, no kids, no significant other at the time like that. And then when you make all of those problems worse, which they are in college football, especially lower level college football, because you're expected to do all the sports, it just got to the point where I thought, no, not worth it. Yeah.
Good. So are you ready to start?
Yeah, bro. Yeah. I thought we'd started.
yeah, we started. I'm going to ask you the first question.
Yeah, cool.
So you've been training like rugby team and football, right? So, I mean, how would you train like for sports performance or athleticism? Especially athleticism.
Yeah. Well, you have to define what athleticism is. So, I mean, Socrates said, the beginning of wisdom lies in the definition of terms. So in order, sorry, go on. What were you going to say?
So, I mean, like speed, change of direction, and coordination.
Well, here's the thing. Athleticism is the quality of being an elite athlete, right? So if you reach the top of your sport, you have sufficient athleticism to be elite. Now, archery is a sport. Sumo is a sport. Marathon running is a sport. Rugby is a sport. So it's just like evolution. The environment is going to select the fittest. Yeah. So it's a heavily loaded work. When you look at field-based sports, if you read Fergus Connolly, Game Changer or The Process, those series of books, he does a great job of outlining the ingredients that make up an athlete. There's the psychological component, which is how well you tap into your tactical, technical understanding.
Yeah.
There's the physical component, which is the raw physical potential that you have to have speed of movement, which is the ultimate goal of any sport. It's just the context in which you express that speed changes. You have the technical component, which is basically mechanical efficiency and movement-based problem solving. And then you have tactics, which is how you apply those technical skills to achieve a tactical outcome. So in a field-based sport like track and field or track, the tactics don't exist. Basically, you run fast, turn left. You can have some tactics in how fast you run at certain times in the race or how you pace yourself throughout a meet, but really it's run fast. In field-based sports, there are so many more ways to win. And ultimately it boils down to you are trying to create uncontested scoring opportunities for your team. Because if I give you an open goal or I give you a goal with 11 players in front of it, you're going to pick the open goal, right?
Yeah.
So your objective is to create the open goal via more force, more speed, or more misdirection, forcing an opponent into an error.
Yeah.
The most trainable of those is misdirection. So, but you said change of direction is one. You can absolutely, change of direction is the technical underpinning of misdirection. I go one way, you think I'm going one way, I cut back and go the other.
Yeah.
Speed, like you said, you can do that. Some people are just not that elusive, not that, their misdirection is not that good, but they just have raw speed that they can run around the outside. And in, sports like rugby, where contact isn't just allowed, it's encouraged, you can have big, strong teams that just either they're so aggressive, they punch a hole, and that's how they create space, or the defenders that get sucked in to shut that down creates an opportunity elsewhere. So the long answer is it depends on your sport, and also it depends on the blend of qualities that you need for the sport or the position. And the crazy thing about field sports is you can have two guys or girls in the same position that have a very different blend of the tactical, technical, physical, psychological.
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to pin down.
So how about I ask it this way? If it's if I let's say basketball player and football player.
Mm-hmm.
Especially football player, a lot of time running back or wide receiver, they're gonna run fast, they're gonna run so fast, but at the same time, their body are gonna be able to take the hit. Yeah. Just like when you play basketball, you're going to go for a layup. Yeah. But if the defender wants to block you, your body gonna need to be able to take the hit and finish strong. How is this going to be, how do you train this?
So you can take that same view of the sport and say tactical, technical, psychological, physical, and you can drill it right down to individual movements, like you just said. So if you look at the scenario of going for a layup in basketball, there is going to be absolutely a physical component to how well you can resist that defender coming in. And generally speaking, the more mass you have to overcome in a skill, the more maximal strength rewards that skill.
Yes.
So when you're just jumping, you're overcoming your own body mass. When you're resisting a defender, you're overcoming your own body mass and that of another person.
Yeah.
Obviously, the constraint of the skill is going to require that you express that force under certain conditions. So it may be frontal plane, horizontal emphasis, short contact time, high movement speed, heavy eccentric isometric component to it. There is also going to be a technical model that maximizes efficiency and allows you to fully express that physical potential, which you get through learning exposures to the game. Because you can't master an environment that you've not inhabited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's through that trial and error of learning the positioning, the timing, how to adapt strategies to become more effective. Tactically as well, what you can do is you can actually reduce the cost of doing that activity. So it may be that you can completely get rid of the need to resist that defender by using misdirection or interpreting their movement to cut back the other way and change.
Yeah.
Or if you can't, you know that there are going to be certain strategies that are more effective or less effective. So you see it all the time in rugby. The different levels of tackle. There's probably like 4 different levels of tackle that all lend themselves more or less to different attackers.
Yeah.
And if you pick the wrong one, you can get concussed. And if you pick the right one, it could be a very easy tackle.
Yeah.
Same thing. And then lastly, of course, there's going to be a psychological component to doing that. So having, good aggression, not being intimidated. If you do end up on the floor, to be emotionally robust and keep coming back. So it's the same principles that get applied to individual skills that get applied to the sport as a whole. The nuance and using your judgment as a coach, where it comes in is you can look at that one event and say, oh, well, this is an important event and you have to train specifically for it. But if it happens, I don't know the stats. If it happens only once a game, but you have to jump or run hundreds of times in a game, where are you going to spend your time?
Run and jump.
Yeah, because if you say, oh, this is specific and this is specific and this is specific, everything is not specific. It becomes general. So I think you have to think carefully about what it is that you're trying to spend your time and energy on. And normally it's what makes me most tired during a game. What do I do most often? What is most important to the outcome of the game? And the answers to those questions is what you need to be training specifically for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's tough.
Got it, man. Got it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the next question.
Yeah.
Can you explain about speed development? Like in field-based sports?
Sure. Okay. Newton's laws of physics or Newton's laws of motion. Okay. What's the first one?
Newton's law of motion?
Yeah. First law is a body stays at rest or continues in a straight line at a constant velocity until a resultant force acts upon it. So that means if you want speed, you have to have a resultant force.
Yes.
The second law of motion says the direction and rate of acceleration of a body is directly proportional to the force applied to it. Okay. So you have to, if you want to get there quickly, apply more force, and you have to apply it in a precise direction. And the third law of motion says when you apply a resultant force to a body, it pushes back with an equal and opposite force.
Yeah.
So you take all those 3 things and you say, all right, create a force, make it as large as possible, and apply it in the right direction. And obviously, if you want to go that way, you have to push that way.
Yeah.
So looking at that, the forces that act upon the body, you have gravity acting this way, which is not really that big. So you have to push against that, otherwise you're going to end up in it.
Yeah.
So really what you're looking at is maximizing propulsive force, that's the force pushing you this way, and minimizing braking force, which is pushing you this way. And obviously every time you step on the floor, there's friction. So friction wants to slow you down. And what you're basically looking to do is in every single step, maximize the propulsive force relative to the braking force. And generally speaking, this is at top speed. the longer you are in contact with the ground, the more friction can slow you down.
Yeah.
So what you tend to see is that the best athletes produce large amounts of force in short amount of time. Yes. And they come up with strategies to minimize ground contact time. So for example, they don't overstride. Generally what happens is the foot hits the floor like this.
Yeah.
If this is my hip, it's not until I get to here that I can produce propulsive force, because otherwise the floor is pushing back against me.
Yeah.
So what you tend to see is guys that strike the floor like this take a very long time and slow down, whereas guys that hit the floor like this, they're off again. You see things like as well at top speed, they don't completely extend their leg. The knee is always a little bit bent when they come off the floor, and that's because that little bit more of extension, you get maybe this much more force, but you get this much more braking force. So the ratio goes off. You see other things like an acceleration. Generally, it tends to be longer contact times, but it doesn't matter because you're going slow. So friction is a lot less. So in acceleration, you can afford to have longer contact times, which means that you can lean forward, you can have positive shin angles that push back into the floor, and so on. Once you get up to top speed, if you imagine this is your body, right? This is the floor.
Yeah.
When I hit the floor at top speed, there's a lot of rotation that wants my face to hit the floor. So to get around that, top speed running tends to be a lot more upright. For this reason, you produce a lot more vertical force, and you just have to hope that there's some horizontal force in there. Because if you try and produce horizontal force at top speed like acceleration, you're just going to go into the floor. So the body angle tends to be like this with every step as you get faster, 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 faster. The contact times get shorter. The shins get more vertical. And generally what you see is strength and rate of force development. Or no, let's say strength. Strength tends to be much more predictive in acceleration. And, you know, reactive strength coordination tends to be a lot more predictive of top speed. On top of that, you have the game to consider. Okay, so people talk about game speed. To me, the equation of game speed is it's your potential. So if I gave you nothing to worry about, I said, right, run as fast as you can, minus losses to the game. So game speed is what you do. Maximal speed is what you can do. And there are going to be all these things that slow you down during the game. Maybe you have to turn your head, turn your arms, stop using your arms. You have a ball under one arm, someone's hanging off your jersey. You have to lean, you have to bump, all this kind of stuff. And everything is a skill. So if I take a track athlete and put him on a football field, he's going to get way slower.
Yeah.
And sometimes those football guys that you test, the fastest guy in a 40-yard dash doesn't look the fastest on the field because they don't have as good a skill of tapping into their potential.
Yeah.
So what you have to do as a coach, if you're familiar with attractors and fluctuators in motor learning, you're exposing athletes to attractor states, which is teaching them the stuff that never changes from rep to rep. And you're cementing that as much as you can. But with a fluctuator, your job is to expose them to the environments that are going to change every single time from rep to rep to rep. Because the best athletes, they can do the stuff that never changes, and they can adapt what it is they're doing according to the environment they find themselves in. For example, processing information, turning their head, turning their torso, holding implements, and so on. So it's somewhat of a challenge because a lot of coaches think that the goal of speed training is just to run fast. That if you say, oh, we took off a 10th off the 10-meter time, job done. But until they run faster on the field or the court, you've not done your job. Yeah.
So, last question, like this question, you spend a lot of lot of time talking about like max velocity. I mean, why max velocity? Like usually everyone can talk about like acceleration.
Yeah.
So why are you spending that much of the time talking about max velocity?
A few different reasons. It is true that most especially court sports, but field-based sports too, you are doing way more accelerating than you are running at top speed.
Yeah.
However, if you look at the posture of acceleration in field and court-based sports, if you imagine that track and field, you can get out some crazy angles. Some guys, strong guys, get out at less than 45 degrees.
Yeah.
If you try to keep those body angles in a team-based sport, it makes it very hard to slow down.
Yeah.
Very hard. So you actually have to be more upright to react, change direction, decelerate, and perceive the game around you. And that looks a lot more like top speed running.
Yes.
If you look at the accelerations in team sports as well, they are not from blocks. So you don't have your hands on the floor like this with your butt in the air with blocks. Most of the accelerations, with few exceptions in field-based sports, come from a moving base. Certainly in rugby and football.
Yeah.
They will accelerate, but actually they're already moving before they put their foot down and then they go.
Like flight 10?
Not necessarily a flight 10, but if you watch a lot of guys, for example, a running back will normally take 2 or 3 steps before they get fed the ball, and then they put their foot down.
Yeah.
Probably not the best example, but you absolutely want to get used to producing as much force as possible during upright postures, and that may look like top speed running.
Yeah.
Another reason is, what is the biggest predictor? Also, I'll ask you in a series of questions. What is the most common preventable injury in field-based sports?
Common preventable injury?
Yep. Hamstring tears. Okay. What are the conditions that most frequently lead to hamstring tears?
Sorry again, I didn't hear that clearly.
What are the conditions that most frequently lead to hamstring tears?
Oh, like top speed.
80% of hamstring tears occur during top speed.
Yeah.
So you do not want your athletes to only train acceleration, and then on the rare occasion when they find themselves at top speed, to be unprepared. Yeah?
Yeah.
So there was a Roman emperor, I forget his name, but he used to take small doses of poison because he was scared of being poisoned. And when Rome fell, he tried to drink poison and he couldn't die, so he had to have his head cut off. Same idea. You are trying to make your athletes strong and robust to the poison of hamstring tears. So even if it isn't the most specific thing, you are trying to prepare them for the rare occasion when they do get up to top speed.
Yeah.
And finally, if you ever read Charlie Francis, he talks about how most people think that weight makes you faster. But he talks about being faster makes you stronger.
Yes.
To me, and he would agree, sprinting at top speed is, with regard to the nervous system, one of the most intensive things that you can do.
Yeah.
Coordination, force outputs, all that kind of stuff. And as a result, I think it represents a really intense stimulus that improves all speed qualities. So generally, there are examples against this. If you look at Cameron Joss at the University of Indiana, he actually proved this year. He did a ton of fly 10s and his guys got slower in acceleration. But my belief is, more often than not, especially with low and intermediate level athletes, if you increase top speed, you'll increase acceleration.
Yeah.
For other athletes, if you increase acceleration, it's no guarantee that you'll increase top speed.
Yeah.
So from just an efficiency standpoint, sometimes if you're forced to make the choice between the two, you would pick top speed. That's why.
That's a lot different than like people was talking about right now.
In terms of
like strength coaches always talk about like they're gonna train acceleration. If they don't have enough time, they're gonna train acceleration.
Here's the thing, though. Do you agree that your job as a strength coach is to train the stuff that is important for the sport that the sport doesn't train? Because here's the thing, right? Why do you have a job as a strength coach? You have a job because the sport doesn't train stuff that's important. Yeah. Okay? That's why we have a job. If you look at the nature of sport, look at GPS reports, watch the game, look at what they're doing. They accelerate a ton. Everything they do is stop-start. They put their foot down, they try and get to the ball. The game actually trains acceleration quite a lot.
Yes.
How often do rugby players or football players hit top speed in a game? Almost never.
Yeah.
So if your job is to train the stuff that is important that the game doesn't stimulate, for example, max strength. Max strength is important for field-based sports, but the game doesn't stimulate it very well because you can't take a barbell on your back on the field. So we train that. Max speed is very important for field-based sports for reasons that we just talked about, and it never gets trained. Yeah. Let's train that. Yeah, that's why. If you look at conditioning, this is maximum, this is nothing. Where does the game live? The game lives here. So why is it that when strength coaches do conditioning, they hit the middle and just do this again? In reality, they need to be going below and above.
Yeah,
because important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're wrong.
I mean, I'm like struggling with this topic, but I always thought that like field-based athletes, they're like more upright, not really accelerating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's a skill because here's the thing. You remember we said fluctuators.
Yeah.
Okay. The nature of the skill that you are performing will shape what body angle is most optimal. The reason we said that you can't go out like this, like a track and field athlete, is because typically there's going to be a lot of traffic. There's going to be decisions that you have to make and so on. But there will be times in the game where you just put your foot down. You don't have to make a decision. Like, for example, an interception. No decisions to be made. Put your foot down and run fast.
Yeah.
So that will be a time where this body angle is good. So what we have to do as coaches is to give them the tools to do both. And one of the things I think that distinguishes really, really good field sport athletes from, very good field sport athletes from the rest is the ability to get in and out of track mechanics and then field sport mechanics.
Yeah.
So being able to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you mentioned that if you run fast, it can make you stronger, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to lead me to the next question. Let's say it's same, let's say just like football team, college football team. And I want to ask if it's like in season and off season. So here's what I thought. Here's what I think. Maybe I'm going to do like max strength and like quarter squat, mid-type pull, that kind of stuff in the off season. But during but in season, I'm probably going to do like more like movement stuff. Not that I didn't do movement in off season, but I don't want to fatigue them. So I do movement and like speed, plyo in the in season. Not really like that much of a strength. not really like quarter squat or mid-thigh pull, maybe a little isometric work, but mainly during the in-season, I'm gonna focus on like movement, speed, and plyo. Do you think that's good?
Well, the funny thing is the reduced range of movement exercises probably cause less muscular soreness and muscle damage than full range movements. So it actually make a strong case to do reduced range of motion in season for the heavy stuff, because ultimately you want to stimulate the central nervous system by having heavy loads, lots of intent, stuff like that. The biggest thing that you need to consider, well, there's a couple of things that you need to consider. What is the most specific thing that field sport athletes can do?
What is the most specific thing? Running?
The game. The game, right?
Oh, yeah.
In what time of the year do they do the most playing of the game?
In season.
Exactly. So if, generally speaking, you need a good balance of general and specific, and in season they get a ton of specific, what should you do in season?
A little less specific?
General, yeah. Your job is to train what the sport doesn't stimulate. So you might actually continue the heavy lifting in season, because maximal strength, maximal power, muscle cross-sectional area, symmetry, for want of a better word, these are all important general qualities that underpin performance in the sport that don't get stimulated by the sport itself. So ironically, your training actually wants to get more general in season compared to preseason. The caveat is your ability to tolerate training stress is limited.
Yeah.
You're still human.
Yeah.
The reason that athletes may be great one week and terrible the next is not physical. Physical variables are really steady from week to week. You get these big changes because of changes in tactical, technical, psychological. If those are the things that determine performance, you need to make sure that the majority of your stress goes to that, and then the minimum goes to physical to retain or still slowly develop those physical qualities. So you do have to train generally, but you need to train with significantly reduced volume, and you need to be a lot more flexible in your approach, because physical readiness is going to change. Some games are harder than others. Some field-based trainings are harder than others. Athletes go up and down.
Yeah.
As the stress status of the athlete rises or falls, your job as a strength coach is to expose them to levels of stress that rise or fall in sync with that.
Yeah.
In preseason, because they're doing so much less of the game, they're doing less specific stuff, you actually need to be more specific in your approach at times. And generally what you'll see is that as the preparation goes on, you get progressively more specific. You go more from volume to intensity. You go more from isolated approaches that target weaknesses to training more strengths and what the position demands. You're going to have that general transition as the prep goes on. So it isn't necessarily what exercise do you pick, it's what exercise represents your ability to hit those objectives, and then what gives you the best return in terms of adaptation on the investment of time, effort, injury risk, and so on. So let's have an example. If you have a short muscular athlete with short femurs that absolutely loves to squat,
yeah,
you're going to squat them in season, like all the way down, heavy, all that kind of stuff, especially if they're not a target. in rugby, you see this all the time. You have guys that are, you know, over 2 meters tall, and they just spent 80 minutes on the weekend getting the shit beaten out of them, and it hurts to put a bar in their back and stuff like that. You may not do deep barbell squats. It may be, like you said, that you do a quarter squat, lockout with bands, and just maximize the intent. But then you work through full range with things like single leg squatting, lunging, leg pressing if you want. So there's just different ways to get what it is that you want and maximize your return.
Yeah. Got it. But like, here's one thing I heard it. I can't remember it's from Rob's podcast or like Joel's podcast.
Yeah.
We're discussing about like how strong and strong enough and how much time we should train our athlete in the weight room or training their speed.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little about this?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at transfer of training, okay, transfer of training is we do an exercise and then we measure the impact on performance in the sport or event. And this way of thinking was developed with track and field. So how far do you throw? How high do you jump? How fast do you run? You know, what's your endurance like? And generally, well, we should take a step back. Classifying exercises, okay? What makes an exercise specific? The answer is how much it shares with the sport in terms of range of motion, where within that range you produce peak force, muscles used, magnitude and direction of force, angular velocity, contact time, regime of muscular work, energy systems, sensory information. Okay? I think I got it. The more an exercise shares with the sport or the action in terms of those criteria, the more specific it is.
Yeah.
The less it shares, the more general it is. Okay. Look at top speed, range of motion during contact time on the floor. It's like 15 degrees of hip extension. Where within that range do you produce peak force? The first 50% of ground contact time, 7.5 degrees of hip extension. Which muscles are used? Glutes and hamstrings. Regime of muscular work, mostly isometric, some eccentric, concentric, mostly isometric. Contact time, 800 to 900 milliseconds, closer to 800 in elite male track and field. Angular velocity of segments. You're moving anywhere from 11 to 12 meters a second. Energy system, alactic, sensory information, blah, blah, blah. Does that sound like a barbell squat?
No.
Deep hip and knee flexion, slow speed, vertical orientation of force, all this kind of stuff. You can just straight away see they're very, very different. So squatting is quite general to running fast.
Yeah.
Okay. So what Bondarchuk found was the earlier you are in your training career, the more general exercises will improve the sport or the thing that you're trying to improve. Okay. The longer you have been training, the less you're going to see that effect. So it's like a tube of toothpaste. When the tube of toothpaste is new, you take off the top and you go like this, and toothpaste goes out the end. But the longer and longer you have it, the more you have to push in a specific direction to get the thing that you want to come out the end. Same with strength. Strength improves running, cutting, jumping, hitting, most earliest in the career. And then what happens is it stops working. So you have to get progressively more specific. So you take Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt in 2008 was not going to be made faster by more squats or power cleans or any weight room exercise. He was going to get faster by sprinting. So how much time should you spend in the weight room you're basically asking yourself, how long has the athlete been training and what is the likely effect of this training exercise going to be on the outcome? And another way to look at it is look at the elite performers in the sport. Okay, you can do a correlation and say, okay, when you squat this much, what is your 40-yard time? When you squat this much, what's your 40-yard time? Boom, boom, boom. And what will happen is it will do this. It will taper off, and then it'll actually go the other way.
Yeah.
If you squat 1 times body weight, are you going to run the fastest? No. If you can squat in the neighborhood of double body weight, are you going to run the fastest? Probably. If you squat 4 times body weight, are you going to be the fastest man on earth? No, you're a competitive powerlifter, and it ceases to be productive. So what you're looking at is, what does it take to be elite? Have we achieved it? And if we have, the likelihood is that chasing more is not going to be productive. It's going to have a neutral effect or actually a worse effect. And you actually need to get more specific in your approach. And what you tend to see, if you look at Matt Ray and Dave Ballou at Alabama football, the amount of strength that you need to be an elite level football player in terms of speed and explosive strength is much lower than people think. It's somewhere in the region of 1.3 to 1.7 times body weight squat. That's not to say that they don't increase maximal strength, but they will chase explosive strength, speed, strength, and it will improve maximal strength, but they're not going to chase it. And obviously you have to consider the impact of external load in sprinting. When people are trying to hit you, maybe you want to be a little bit stronger, but to actually be fast and explosive, it's lower than people think.
So back to the in-season, off-season question.
Yeah.
Why? So if we want our athlete to be faster, jump higher, I mean, why shouldn't we be training these more? I mean, squat like.
I know. Yeah. Why wouldn't we? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
So I mean, but what you just said is like you should train like squat, like quarter squat in season. But why don't we train like plyo more or like sprinting more?
Well, the reason is what a lot of coaches will do is they'll say, okay, squatting, lunging, deadlifting. Is it that specific to running fast? No, it's not. And then they'll jump straight to, let's do the most specific things, sprint, jump, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The problem with that is there is a clear relationship between if you move well, if you have good muscle cross-sectional area, if you have good maximal strength, generally you are going to be more robust to injury regardless of mechanism. That's clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's value in that, right? Likewise, every single exercise, every bit of intensity, every bit of volume, frequency, eventually stops working. Okay? So this is why when you first start training, when you're 14, 15 years old, every single week, another 5 kilos, another 5 kilos. I'm 35 now and I don't bench press 500 kilos. So clearly everything stops working, right?
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to use the most general exercise that you can while you can. Because as the body stops listening, you have to train with more intensity, more volume, more frequency, more specificity to keep things moving.
Yeah.
And if you use too specific exercises too early in the career, and Natalie Bondarchuk would say that you have robbed the athlete twice. You've robbed them once because they weren't ready.
Yeah.
And you've robbed them twice because you could have waited 5 years, and now when they do get to that point and they need something new, you've already used it. So you have to use the minimum amount of specificity at each stage of the athlete's career to keep improving your key metrics. That's why you wouldn't jump straight to it.
Like building a bigger base, right?
Yeah. General exercises form the base. The specific exercises and qualities are built upon.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks. So I'm going to ask the last question and I'm going to let you go, okay?
Cool. Yeah.
So you mentioned about like between games, it's not really like, it's like there's going to be fluctuations, right?
Yeah.
So how do you like monitor the fatigue? Monitor like the pressure? Do you use like heart rate variability or like RSI jumps or like velocity based training?
It depends on the fatigue. So your body is not just one system. Your body is a network of physiological systems.
Yeah.
So if you look at all the physiological systems, so Omega Wave would say that there's 7 systems. There's the sensory motor, central nervous system. There is the autonomic, endocrine, detoxification, cardiopulmonary, and one more. It's gone out of my head. But your body is going to use all of those systems to respond to the threat of a stressor. Okay? In the short term, to the alarm phase of general adaptation syndrome, which is just to secure the immediate short-term survival of the organism. And in the long term, which is to facilitate a specific long-term response to reduce the threat of the stressor in subsequent exposure. That depends entirely on the nature of the stressor that you've been exposed to. So weightlifting is a stressor.
Yes.
But the form of the specific form of damage that it does is very, very different to the stress of sprinting, or the stress of distance running, or the stress of contact in field-based sports. So the answer is it depends on what it is you're doing, and it depends on the effect that it has on you as the individual, because different athletes will draw on different systems to different extents. So unfortunately, there's no one global measure of stress. And this is why you have to have different approaches. And again, to steal from Fergus Connolly, what I like is he talks about there being 4 flavors of stress. There's typically going to be neuromuscular, so effectively like draining the battery. There's going to be metabolic. That was the 7th system, metabolic. There's going to be psychological, so cognitive, emotional stress. And there's going to be, he would call it vibrational impact, so the muscle damage stress. And typically, you're going to have activities that expose athletes to more of some of those flavors and less of some of those flavors. So, for example, a small-sided game in soccer with very low player density per square meter is typically going to be large metabolic fatigue, and if with a big enough pitch, large neuromuscular stress, because a lot of high-speed running might not be that stressful cognitively because it's just the nature of the exercise, and it might not be that stressful in terms of muscle damage because there's not a lot of contact, the volume isn't sufficiently high, and so on. So in that instance, you would want measures of neuromuscular and metabolic fatigue, which may be heart rate variability, and it may be velocity-based training. On other days where you have very intense psychological stress, it may be that a profile of mood states questionnaire is going to be a good indicator. And with regard to muscle damage, it may be that you are able to collect creatine kinase for example. Or you just do a survey of what's your muscle soreness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you need a blend that tries to cover and collect the biggest picture possible rather than rely on one. The closest that we can get to a global indicator of stress tends to be training impulse. So duration multiplied by subjective rating of perceived exertion, because the reason general adaptation syndrome has its name is that the body is, although it's made up of many systems, it's one unit, and it responds to all forms of stress, whether physical or non-physical. So if you think about, you have an argument with your girlfriend, your heart rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, you mobilize glucose, your blood pressure goes up. That's the same response that you have to exercise. So your body doesn't know the difference. So training impulse and subjective RPE can be a good indicator of global stress. But if the average human being is not clever enough to know the difference between a headache and brain cancer, you can't trust athletes' opinions by themselves. So you have that as like a general thing, and then you have to drill down and try and get objective data and think carefully about what data is you're trying to get. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Good. Thank you for your time, man. Thank you.
Nah, pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of yours. I follow your Instagram like for a long time.
Thank you.
Really helps. And the way
I appreciate it.
And the way you answer the question, although it seems like the answer is the same as other coaches, but the way you think is like totally different, and it's like it blows my mind. You really help.
Well,
man.
I mean, the sport coaches don't like it.
No, it really helps.
You know, a good book. Do you follow Shane Parrish at all?
No, sorry, can you?
So Shane Parrish. So his podcast is called The Knowledge Project, or if you go on to his website, it's called Farnham Street. So FARNHAM Street blog. And he has a book that's, in fact, I'll show you the book. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, this book.
Okay.
That's called Great Mental Models, Volume 1. And it's really good in terms of like not teaching you what to think, but it teaches you how to think. So thinking about, he talks about first principles. What's the number one thing we're trying to achieve? Is it bigger squats, bigger deadlifts, higher jumps? No, you're trying to win. And then thinking like second order thinking. Well, okay, here's the thing that I want, but if I do this, what are the second order effects going to be? And so on. It's a great book. I would recommend you pick that up.
Thanks, man. Really helps.
Yeah.
And last, like, can you tell, like, if there's a coach want to contact you, where to find you? And I know there's a website and there's like online education courses, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell like the coaches in town about your stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm most active on strengthcoachnetwork.com. So it's like an education platform for strength coaches. We have like forum, monthly lectures, Q&A. We're just about to start doing like interview preparation, ton of stuff. But then alongside that, we also have a long form course called Strength Coach Network Fundamentals. It's 20 hours of material from like elite level team sport coaches, and that's been very popular recently. You can go straight to strengthcoachnetwork.com, or if you go to my Instagram, so at Rugby Strength Coach, there's links in my bio for that. And yeah, people can contact me through Rugby Strength Coach, Strength Coach Network, any of those online.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you for your time. Really helps.
Is it Mandarin in Taiwan?
Yeah.
Yeah, Shishi, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for my poor English.
No, perfect English. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, bro. All right, man. See ya.
Yeah, see you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all. And that's for today. I'm going to put the name on my Instagram and the book of the name on my Instagram, and also going to put it on the link of my YouTube. Okay? See you.